Lightblade is one of the most difficult Grandmaster Nightfalls in Destiny 2, featuring one of the most challenging and chaotic boss rooms we've ever seen. By this point, you likely have seen a lot of good, solid loadout suggestions for people far more accomplished than I am. You know, things such as Storm Chaser and Hothead will be recommended, and yeah, those are actually really great options. In fact, you should use those. But what if I suggested something a little more off the beaten path, something that hasn't really been used much the last couple of seasons? My name is Davey, and I spend a lot more time in endgame content than any reasonable person should, and enjoy it a lot more than is probably healthy. And that was an odd sentence for me to say. Anyway, today I want to talk about a weapon that last saw its heyday back in Season 14 when Breach and Clear was demolishing everything in the game, and this weapon in particular was in every team's heavy slot. That is, if you had managed to earn it. That's right, I'm talking about Anarchy. Sure, it was nerfed after Season 14, but it's still actually really good, and even saw a bit of a resurgence back when Starfire Protocol Warlocks became all the rage with Solar 3.0, especially for solo duality attempts. So yeah, we're bringing Anarchy into Lightblade. Let's go over my full loadout though. I'm on Hunter for this particular attempt, and yeah, I'm 100% crutching on Invis with Omnioculus. Look, I'm trying to get the clear at this point, okay? Memes come later. And you can be sure we will be running some dumb things in this GM. I'll refer you to my Warden of Memes videos from earlier on. Anyway, most of my build is pretty typical. Double arc resist, some high energy fire with elemental wells providing me charged with light, and what I need for champions, in this case, barrier and unstoppable, although I am not running unstoppable. For weapons, I'm using a scout rifle, Night Watch, for previous mentioned barrier champs, but also rolling with a crafted Forebearance from the Vow of Disciple raid. Mine has enhanced chain reaction for when adds are bunched up together, as well as enhanced ambitious assassin for that extra round after getting a kill. This is great for ad clear, particularly when Thrall are rushing at you at various points in this GM. And then there's Anarchy, a weapon that was dominant for a long time after it was introduced in the now sunset Scourge of the Past raid, but was eventually nerfed due to how popular and strong it was. The nerf was twofold: a reduction of damage, which wasn't that big of a deal, but more importantly, a reduction in overall ammo capacity from 26 to 16. This is what affected it the most, and ultimately people moved on to other things, like Divinity. Can't wait to talk about that one. In any case, this build made sense to me because of the arc burn, obviously, but also because ad control and being able to damage things while moving is particularly invaluable in this GM, whether it be the opening section outside, the first main room inside, the swamp with Weight of Darkness, but especially in the boss room. Being able to tag bigger enemies with a couple of Anarchy shots and reposition made a huge difference in how effective we were in several sections, and that's with me still not being all that good with it still. I did just only recently get it from the exotic kiosk. Yeah, I wasn't lucky enough to get it from Scourge while it was in the game, despite several attempts with my old group. Forebearance was also pretty helpful, maybe not as much as in other GMs, but still useful when red bars were stacked up together. To complement my build, Flip the Giant was using Wither Horde, again for ad control, along with Tarnished Metal and Storm Chaser. It was a Thunder Crash Titan with Aeons on for extra heavy ammo, and that came in handy a couple of times. Fated, on the other hand, was running on a Void Bubble Titan with Arbalest, the gun, not my cat, Horror's Lease for the 3 unstoppable champs that are in this GM, and Storm Chaser as well. Again, you could substitute Hothead and any other combination of weapons here, but what we had going was pretty solid. So now that all of that is out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about each section a bit and how we managed to make it through. In the opening section, the main thing to do right away is get rid of the boss. Seriously, he's going to pepper you with massive arc shots that will one-shot you, so getting rid of him is absolutely crucial. After that, we kind of split up and started whittling things down a bit. There are 2 barrier champs here, as well as a couple of arc shielded knights, so those become top priorities. But don't sleep on the acolytes. They will be spamming grenades, and they can kill you pretty quickly too. You don't have to kill everything out here, but it's very likely that one or more of you can get picked off if you don't while trying to get into the doorway. So we opted to make sure everything was dead instead. Watch out for lucent moths as well. They can kill you very quickly and are really easy to miss. Once inside, things can get out of hand quickly if you aren't careful. This is one of the spiciest rooms in the entire Grandmaster. Don't kill the acolytes that spawn in, but do get rid of the wizards right away. Their arc blasts can ruin your run pretty quickly, and they tend to stay up near the entrance to the room. There are 2 of them, so make sure both of them are dead. The Lightbearer Knight should be your next target, but be extremely cautious with him. His suppression grenades are an instant kill if you're close enough, and he will spam them. I watched Fallout's solo attempt where a Lightbearer Knight threw 4 consecutive grenades in the span of a few seconds. When he pops his super, his shield toss is also an instant kill, so back up and wait for him to come out of it. If someone's using a glaive, you can block the shield toss, but it's probably best just to back off. Titans. Your storm grenades are extremely helpful here, so use them, although be careful. They may take out some of the acolytes and inadvertently spawn the next wave of adds. If you have an Invis Hunter, have them do the finishing of the ghost unless you're absolutely sure you can get the ghost kill. After that, there are some barrier champs and acolytes to deal with, but be ready to move because once you kill the acolytes, the Lightbearer Knight will show up. We like to stay by the entrance of the room at this point because he tends to jump down below, but again, exercise caution. Anarchy and Forebearance were huge in this section as large swarms of Thrall were running around the room, and Anarchy helped us tick the Lightbearer's damage down. It's also worth noting that if you kill enough stuff here, you may spawn the third Lightbearer that spawns into this section, so just be mindful of that. This room requires you to be alert. It requires you to be able to move quickly, and it's really, to me, the hardest part before the boss room. As I mentioned, another Lightbearer will spawn in eventually, so dispatch him as well, and if the barrier champs are still up, go ahead and finish them off. Ironically, the barrier champs are probably the lesser of all the threats in this room, but they are boomer knights, which means they can kill you pretty quickly if you aren't careful. Once everything is clear, you can move on. After that, the next real tricky section isn't until after you get off the boat. Before that, while in the canal, but after dunking the 2 orbs guarded by Lightbearers, that part's not too terribly difficult, just take your time. Your best bet is to jump off to the sides, either the left or the right. I usually went left with Faded and Flip going right, while taking your time to kill things and move up slowly. Wizards and Shriekers are the biggest threats here, but they can be dealt with from range. Once you kill the last Shrieker, jump through the portal and be ready to take on a bunch of Thrall. But again, Anarchy, Storm Grenades, Forbearance really made this part pretty easy as the Thrall kind of just run themselves into death. Really wasn't all that tricky and you shouldn't have too much trouble here. Once in the Darkness Swamp though, it can get rough again. Your best bet is just to ignore the lamps and after killing the initial spawn of adds, run up as a group to the far right and hug the right side of the arena and team shoot things whenever possible. An Invis Hunter makes this a little bit easier. If you have an aforementioned Invis Hunter, it's sometimes worth letting them run ahead and try and sneak their way to the final pillars, but it's not a guarantee. You could move from lamp to lamp, but things can surround you quickly, and with the 3 of the moths at each lamp, it's not really worth the hassle in my opinion. You're going to be getting chased by Screebs pretty constantly. We moved pretty methodically through this section, at least until it started getting a little spicy, and with the finish line in sight, I chose to go invisible and make a run for it to get us through. It's worth noting that once one person makes it through the final pillar, the enemies will despawn and Weight of Darkness will lift. There's one final stretch before the boss room, but again, this one isn't too difficult. This is where the Unstoppables tend to hang out, with one right in the first part of the section and then 2 more at the bottom. Again, take your time and whittle things down from relative safely. Watch out for moths and just beware of things running up on you out of nowhere. The boss is hanging around here, but if you can get rid of the Shriekers, he'll run off, so try to remove them immediately if you can. Arbalest works really well here. If anyone's running Aeons, also use this last opportunity to gather heavy ammo before the boss room, as there are the previously mentioned Unstoppables in this section. After that, it's time to gather yourself and jump into the fray. But don't be like me and break your ankles. The boss is very mobile, but it's possible to force him to stay in one spot by having one player kite him by jumping back and forth with him. This is a great way to kind of settle things down, but it does require your teammates to keep trash ads off of you, and sometimes he just doesn't cooperate. Be ready to readjust your strategy on the fly. You'll get some thrall spawns during the first third of his health bar, so be mindful of them. Forbearance and Witherhoard really helped keep those things clear. But this is where Anarchy really starts to shine in this GM. Sure, you've been using it on light bearers and barrier champs and such, but the ability to tag the boss with a couple of rounds, run off while taking damage over time while clearing other ads is massively helpful, especially if he's pursuing you. Don't go too crazy with it, but try to hit him occasionally to get him to his next damage point. After about a third of his health is gone, you'll get a light bearer knight and 2 arc shielded melee knights in the middle, and they will hurt you very badly if you let them. My suggestion: get rid of the light bearer knight first. He can and will one-shot you from a distance with either his grenade or his super, and is easily the most dangerous part of this wave. Then, make sure everybody's ready. Get everybody into position, and gather yourselves before killing the last of the knights, as you'll immediately get more ad spawns once you've killed those melee knights, including 2 barrier knights. And this is where things can really go off the rails pretty quickly. Someone being able to keep the boss's attention is helpful, but the reality is the barrier knights are boomer knights, so they can also do some serious damage very quickly. We ultimately decided to try and kill one of them as quickly as possible, then reposition to work on some of the red bars that were scattered about. We then split back up to try and manage the final barrier champ before refocusing on the boss. It's very easy to die in dumb ways during this section. The worst thing as a teammate you can do if someone goes down is immediately try to rush over. Don't be afraid to rotate to a new position and wait for the right moment. Nothing sucks worse than rezzing your teammate only to get them shellacked by a boomer knight or the boss himself. However, once the barrier knights are gone, you will have a brief moment to gather yourselves, but be mindful of the cursed thrall on the ground below. These can be useful, for instance, for ammo farming, but if you fall down and you're not really aware of where they're at, you could be caught in a bad spot. However, do utilize them if you are looking for ammo. They will eventually drop something. Otherwise, stay spread out and damage when you can. Again, Anarchy was super helpful here for that reason alone, as was Witherhoard. Once you get to the H in the Lightblade part of his name, you'll get another round of acolytes and barrier champs. Just use the same method as before to get through this part. Get rid of 1 barrier right off the bat, and then work on the rest of the ads, all while being mindful of where the boss is. If you see someone going after a champ and they are being pursued by the boss, let them know. It is far better to just run away from everything than to try and kill the barrier but get killed by the boss instead. Once again, focus fire if you can, and just take them out one at a time. Once another third of his health is gone, it is time for another round of ads, once again with a single Lightbearer Knight and 2 Arc Melee Knights. Use the same process before, killing the Lightbearer as quickly as possible before moving on to the Melee Knights. I tagged him with a couple of Anarchy, went invis so he couldn't figure out where I was, and just waited until it was time to pop a couple of more, invis again, and was able to kill him without really him being any kind of a threat. It's not always that easy, but if you can get rid of him quickly, do so. Then move on to the Melee Knights. Again, it's worth a reminder that these guys can be used for heavy ammo with Aeons, so if you're running low on heavy, if someone's wearing Aeons, have them finish the Melee Knights and be ready to go again. Because once you kill the last knight, it will get really, really spicy. First, the boss will lose his helmet and become significantly faster. Yay! You'll also get a bunch of thralls spawning in who will rush you as well. Forbearance and Witherhoard put in a lot of work here, as you'll be able to handle most of them pretty quickly. But again, you have more barrier champs. There are 2 of them again, as well as acolytes. The same method as before is useful here. Get rid of 1 of the barrier knights and then get rid of the second one. Just continue to be mindful and call out the boss's location. He is significantly faster. He can get to you quicker, and he's constantly shooting. Melt 1 champ, reposition to find the second, and eliminate it and the rest of the ads. Anarchy was huge for us in this GM because of the ability to do the damage while staying on the move. It's harder to do all of this with rockets, but it's doable, and it's even harder with linears, but again, it's doable. If somebody has the boss's attention and is able to kite them successfully, you can do a lot of damage pretty quickly. It isn't going to do the most damage though, Anarchy that is, but being able to tag him and run off makes this encounter much safer, so I would definitely recommend someone bring it to the fray along with a Waveframe GL like Forebearance, especially if you're struggling to get through this GM. We had failed probably 11 times going back to the first season that it was around before we finally got our first clear. In any case, once the last wave of champs is gone, you are free to damage the boss, so hit him with everything you have. Dealing with the champs and acolytes while the boss is blasting you is really the hardest part, and there's really no shame if it takes a few tries to figure it out. Just keep at it. You'll eventually get it. But that's all I have for this video. Do you, the viewer, have any tips or tricks for this GM that you'd like to share? Go ahead and leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.